They were the women who had had it all, the wives and mistresses of Nazi Germany's leaders. They had lived gilded, luxurious lives at the expense of the state, being used as symbols for perfect German womanhood, and often wielded considerable influence and power behind the scenes.
Mothers, your cradles are armies sleeping. This striking phrase was used by Adolf Hitler to refer to German women during the Third Reich. For the Führer, politics was a matter for men. But this did not mean that women were sidelined. It was their responsibility to raise the future German generation, which, according to Hitler's own words, would survive for 1,000 years. The wives of Nazi leaders bore the greatest responsibility and were expected not to deviate from their assigned roles. Any dissent they might have had was kept silent. However, we all know now that the eternal empire Hitler dreamed of died with him. What then happened to these women after Germany's abrupt collapse? Today, in this new episode of Military History, we will tell you everything about the fate of Nazi wives after World War II. From a man as turbulent as Adolf Hitler, one could expect his love life to share this characteristic. Although he was associated with many women, the only romantic relationship for which there is clear evidence was with Eva Braun. She started working as an assistant to Heinrich Hoffmann, the official photographer of the Nazi Party, when she was just 17 years old. It was during frequent visits to his studio that the future Führer met the woman who would become his wife. In 1929, several years before Hitler came to power, they began a secret relationship. Eva saw him as an older man with a charming mustache, but very intelligent. Hitler was captivated, but he only pursued the romance after carefully investigating her family tree to ensure she had no Jewish blood. He did not want to make the relationship public for fear of losing popularity among his female followers. Furthermore, at that time, he associated his party with chastity, so being seen with a young girl would not set a good example. Despite the secrecy of their relationship and Hitler's tendency toward privacy, rumors of other love affairs persisted throughout his regime. Surprisingly, one of these rumors involved a British woman. Unity Mitford was a member of a well-known English aristocratic family. Despite her young age, she and her sisters were politically active, with a strong sympathy for fascist ideology. They frequently traveled to Germany, and one of them even married in Joseph Goebbels' drawing room, with Adolf Hitler as the guest of honor. Unity, fascinated with the Nazi leader, moved to Munich in the mid-1930s. After several attempts, she managed to meet Hitler at a gathering and immediately fell under his spell. Her life's goal became to be close to him. After several attempts, she finally had a private dinner with Hitler, prompting her to write to her father, "I think I am the luckiest girl in the world. To me, he is the greatest man of all time." Hitler, in turn, was infatuated with her, considering her a perfect example of the Aryan woman. He often took her to conferences and Nazi party meetings. It is even said that he used the Englishwoman to provoke jealousy in his girlfriend, Eva Braun. While the truth of their alleged affair remains dubious, their close relationship cannot be denied.
Unity's relationship with Hitler progressed reasonably fast after she'd met him, and it wasn't too long before she was very much in his kind of inner circle. She would be invited to the party rallies, to sort of state events, so she was very much persona grata.
Unity not only became familiar with Hitler, but also with his ideology. She had become a Nazi fanatic and did not miss any opportunity to declare Judaism as a virus of Western civilization. When the Nazis annexed Austria, she could be seen with the Führer on the balcony in Vienna. However, the last thing she wanted was a war between England and Germany, which she considered her two homes. Many times she implored Hitler to seek an alliance with the British, but not even all the affection he had for her would stand in the way of his ambitions. On September 1st, 1939, the Germans invaded Poland, starting World War II. 2 days later, Britain declared war on them. Unity couldn't take it. Using a pistol Hitler had given her for protection, she shot herself in the head. But her attempt to kill herself was unsuccessful. She was taken to a hospital, where the Nazi leader paid for her treatment. However, she never fully recovered. She was taken back to England, where doctors said it would not be possible to remove the bullet from her skull. For the next 10 years, Unity had difficulty walking and her mental capacity was severely reduced. Still, she remained loyal to the Nazi Party, declaring on one occasion that if she had children, she would name her first child Adolf. But she never got that chance. In May 1948, she died of meningitis, caused by the bullet still in her head. As mentioned, there were always rumors of a love affair with Adolf Hitler. It was even said that upon her return to England, she gave birth to a baby whose father was the Führer. But there is no substantial evidence to support these claims. Contrary to what happened with Unity Mitford, Eva Braun was never very interested in politics. She was considered superficial, more concerned with her image than with international events. She even attempted suicide twice when she felt that Hitler was neglecting her due to his focus on governing the country. One attempt was just before he came to power, during the extensive political campaign that meant long periods without seeing her lover. The other attempt was in 1935, with similar reasons. Many believed she was just seeking attention from the Nazi leader. Despite Hitler becoming more considerate towards Eva, her role remained discreet. Only a very small circle of trust knew about their relationship. One could say she lived in the shadow of the Führer, but this did not mean she lacked great influence over him. In 1943, Germany declared it would transition to a total war economy. This meant non-essential luxury products would cease production. When Braun realized she would no longer have access to cosmetics and other luxuries, she protested to Hitler. The Führer decided to slow down production rather than ban it completely. By then, Germans could see the war was going to be much more challenging than their leaders had told them. The Allies were defeating them on all fronts, pushing them further back into their own territory. As a result, Hitler had almost constant meetings with his generals and advisors, relegating private life. Eva Braun, secluded in her home in the Bavarian mountains, felt lonely and abandoned.
Ich würde sagen, nach dem, was ich heute weiß, Por lo que sé hoy, diría que era bastante depresiva. Siempre tuvo que disimular esa depresión con deporte, con ropa. Siempre necesitaba distraerse de sus penas, pero nadie se enteró de ello en la vida cotidiana.
However, when the Soviets cornered the Nazis in Berlin in April 1945, Eva did not hesitate to fly there to be with her lover. When Hitler finally accepted that there was no chance of victory and decided to end his life, Braun wanted to share that fate. Before that, on the night of April 29th, they were married, but their marriage lasted less than 40 hours. The next day, as husband and wife, the Führer shot himself in the temple, while Braun, for his part, poisoned himself with cyanide. Hitler had left explicit orders that both bodies were to be doused with gasoline and lit in the garden of the bunker so as not to leave any trace of them. And so it was done. But Eva was not the only one in her family who sought to associate with members of the Nazi Party. One of her sisters, Gretl, also became part of the German leader's small inner circle. She got a job as an assistant to Heinrich Hoffmann, thanks to Eva's influence. She quickly began looking for a suitable husband among German officers, mainly those belonging to the SS, the party's paramilitary organization. She knew that a relationship with one of them ensured rapid promotion in the social hierarchy. That was how she met Hermann Fegelein. He served as the representative of Heinrich Himmler, commander of the SS in Hitler's cabinet. But he did not enjoy a very good reputation in military circles. The cavalry unit he led had achieved great results. On the contrary, it had suffered a terrible number of casualties in the battles in which it fought. But it was also the one behind many brutal atrocities on the Eastern Front against civilians and prisoners of war. That, coupled with Fegelein's manipulative personality, meant that he was rewarded with rapid promotions in his career. Hermann and Gretl married in June 1944, which further cemented the position of the new wife in the party hierarchy. She was also finally able to step out of her sister's shadow, now being the wife of an officer who, by all indications, had a great future ahead of her thanks to her unscrupulousness. It was not long before Gretl became pregnant. The doctor informed them that the due date would be April 1945. What should have been a moment of happiness for the couple was completely overshadowed by the historical context. As already mentioned above, the situation in the country was critical. While Gretl was sheltered far from the capital, her husband was in Berlin, together with Hitler and Eva Braun, waiting for a miraculous salvation. But Fegelein knew that victory was impossible. Desperate, he urged his sister-in-law to flee the city behind the Führer's back, but she refused. It was then that he made the drastic decision to desert to the army and tried to escape from the capital. However, he was unsuccessful and was captured. During those same days, the Nazi leaders learned that Heinrich Himmler had tried to negotiate peace with the Allies separately, without informing Hitler. Hitler exploded in fury, and with the traitor no longer within reach, he took it out on his representative. Despite Eva's pleas for mercy, Fegelein was sentenced to death and shot. Here's the translation. Less than a week later, with her husband and sister deceased, Gretl gave birth to her daughter, whom she named Eva. This child was considered the last of the descendants of the Nazi leaders. After the war ended, Gretl disappeared from public life, although it is known that she remarried. She died in 1987 after an illness, marking the end of the family, as her daughter had passed away several years earlier. Like her aunt, she made the drastic decision to take her own life. It was never known if Gretl regretted her ties to Nazism, as she never spoke about it. The entire history of the Braun family went with her to the grave. There was no doubt about Nurse Margarete Boden's complete loyalty to Nazi ideology. Unlike the Braun sisters, she was a faithful member of the Nazi Party. She joined in 1928, a year after meeting Heinrich Himmler, who would become her husband. He initially considered chastity a great virtue, but changed his mind shortly after starting a relationship with Margarete. This shift was also fueled by the party's ideology, which encouraged them to have children to ensure the survival of the Aryan race. Following this belief, their only daughter Gudrun was born in 1929. Margarete remained active during World War II in her role as a nurse. She supervised hospitals both in Germany and in occupied territories. She even traveled to occupied Poland, where many of the worst atrocities against the Jewish population took place. However, she felt no empathy or remorse for the actions of the German forces. She was staunchly anti-Semitic and frequently complained about having to work near people whom she considered inferior. According to accounts from other women in Nazi circles, Margarete was never fully accepted. She was seen as cold and humorless, and her attempts to manipulate other wives, as she allegedly did with Heinrich, were viewed negatively. The SS commander, obsessed with his idea of Aryan survival, began to see monogamy as anti-Nazi. He even separated from his wife, though they did not divorce, and engaged in an affair with his secretary, with whom he had 2 more children.
He wanted to divorce his wife and marry Potthast, but such a move would have been hypocritical, since Himmler demanded the highest moral behavior and standards from his SS subordinates, and officially frowned on the very behavior he was secretly practicing. So Potthast became Himmler's long-term mistress.
Nevertheless, his wife remained faithful. A few days after Hitler's death, Margarete and her daughter were captured by the Allies and interrogated about Himmler's whereabouts, who had escaped without a trace. She denied knowing where he was, and everything indicated she was telling the truth. When the commander was captured and chose to take his own life, his wife made it clear that she did not know about the crimes he had committed. Nonetheless, she and her daughter were detained for over a year until they were released. Aside from some minor penalties, she was not convicted for her affiliation with the Nazi Party, which Margarete described as a formality, although she shared its official ideology. Although she never spoke ill of her husband in public, she wanted to distance herself from his image. In contrast, her daughter, embittered by the injustices she witnessed against her family, remained loyal to her father, and even as an adult, joined fascist parties that sought to revive Nazi ideology. Margarete's political stance, arguing that she was removed from the government's operations, was very common among the wives of high-ranking Nazis. Emmy Sonnemann, an actress and wife of Hermann Goering, leader of the German Air Force, was another who thought this way. Despite this, many considered her as the First Lady of the Third Reich. She married Goering in 1935 and joined the party 3 years later. That same year, they had a daughter named Edda. Before the outbreak of the war, Emmy acted as hostess to Hitler at many state functions, thus becoming one of the most important women in the regime. However, she soon fell out of favor with the Führer, as she could not conceal her disdain for his girlfriend, Eva Braun, with whom she felt rivalry for her position as First Lady. Despite this political downfall, she continued to benefit from her marital relationship. The Goerings owned numerous mansions and castles in Austria, Germany, and Poland. Additionally, Hermann frequently appropriated paintings confiscated from Jews and other enemies of the Reich. His collection was valued in millions of dollars. Nevertheless, after Germany's surrender, Emmy repeatedly claimed to be apolitical and not involved in her husband's life. The Allies, however, disagreed after the war ended. They sentenced her to 1 year in prison and confiscated a third of her property, including all the artworks they held. When Goering was sentenced to death, she consoled him, saying he would bravely sacrifice himself for Germany. She survived her husband by nearly 30 years, passing away in 1973. But perhaps the woman who best embodied the Nazi ideal of femininity was Gerda Bormann, wife of Martin Bormann, Hitler's personal secretary. They married in 1929 when she was 19 years old, and a few months later, they had their first child, named Martin Adolf. The child, blonde and with light eyes, began to be seen as the heir of the Reich, who should follow in the footsteps of the Führer. His mother was entrusted exclusively with the task of raising him to achieve this. Although this corresponded more to his father's desires, Gerda, to avoid contradicting him, showed no opposition. Nonetheless, she also professed a blind loyalty to the leader. The young woman, fervently following Nazi ideology, fulfilled her role as a mother to propagate the Aryan race. She had 9 more children, becoming one of the most prolific women in the party, and was even awarded for this. Not even when Martin Bormann became involved in an affair with a famous actress did she cease to be faithful to him and to Hitler, whom she saw as incapable of making mistakes.
Gerda, a tall woman who towered over her husband, was often humiliated by him in front of guests, while in private, Bormann behaved in a loving and sentimental manner. She supported the idea of something called parallel marriages, so a man could produce more offspring for Hitler, and tolerated his affairs accordingly.
Gerda held this opinion until Germany's fall in 1945. 1 year later, she died of cancer in an Italian prison. 9 of her 10 children survived her. Most of them rejected Nazi ideology, including Martin Adolf, the supposed heir of the Reich. Overall, Gerda is not considered a staunch Nazi like some of the other wives. Instead, she is viewed as a victim who was unable to discern whom she was associating with. For Nazi men, their wives generally had a peripheral role. While there was genuine affection in some of these relationships, they were often not allowed to participate in state matters. Their roles were to raise the future of the German party, and not much more. Many of them, although not Nazi fanatics themselves, were never able to condemn their husbands' actions. Whether out of love, loyalty, or indoctrination, they defended the Third Reich and its brutalities until their death. We've reached the end of the video, and we want to ask you, do you think these women should have been judged more harshly? Don't forget to leave your answer in the comments section, and subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that have left their mark on history.